Okay, we're good.
So good evening and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us here. For those that may be joining us in the recordings later on, my name is Sue Frawley. My pronouns are she and her. I am the Community and Family Services Coordinator for GLIS. And it's my honor tonight to bring two parents to you to talk about what happens after your child comes out to you. And so we're going to be talking about that process primarily from a parent perspective. So this is good for parents and for our youth to understand what goes on with parents after the initial sharing. And this evening I have two parents, and I'm going to have them just introduce themselves to you as well. First, Jean, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jean Mullen.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Donna? Oh, we got to unmute. There we go.
Hey, I'm Donna. Nice to see everybody here.
Thank you. So these two parents have graciously offered this evening to tell you a bit about their story with their children and to be a place where you can ask questions about the process, about the journey, and from a parent perspective, get answers. And of course, doing the family services as I do, I can help share as well. But really, it's about parents and youth. So who would like to go first, Donna or Jean, in talking about your family's story about coming out and the journey that came with it?
I'm happy to start. My son came out during middle school, I would say, and it took a little time for him to come out. It was, I would say, middle school was a very confusing time for us because middle school is just a very confusing time for everybody. So it's really hard, really easy to miss signs of things, but it certainly wasn't easy to miss the fact that he went from, a very good student, very outgoing, a lot of friends, to surly and withdrawn and suddenly not doing homework and all just doing a 180. And so, and not talking. So no matter what we tried to get him to talk about, he just, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he didn't quite understand what was happening. He sort of did, but not quite. When he finally had the words to it, he was a freshman in high school, and it was a very scary time because he, at that point, unbeknownst to his father and I, he had been self-harming, and he really had gotten to a very dark place. And he's an only child, so this is even harder for us. Not, we're very open, very liberal family. There was not any kind of religious pressure or conservative viewpoints that he would, so, it was very confusing to us as his parents when we finally learned. But it really, I think, was a matter of him having the words, having the comfort. And then when he finally did tell us, it really did challenge our liberal selves. I think that, and the fact that he had been on the internet on this journey and more in depth for a good 3 years before he shared it with us. So not only were we trying to catch up in a hurry, and this was about 10 years ago, so really public conversation about what it means to be transgender was pretty new. So we were learning with the rest of the world. And I think what I realized pretty quickly was I was 3 years behind him. He was way ahead. And so once he hit a dark place and we were able to get him out of that and on the road, it's not like it was a simple puppy dogs and rainbows. There was a very serious emotional journey that we went through the high school years with him. And the good news is we went from a point of him standing in the kitchen, I don't know, I think it was sometime in his sophomore year when I said, let's start thinking about college. And his response to me was, what's the point? I'm not going to be here. Two, he's about to get his graduate degree in social work and has come just miles and miles and miles. And that's a whole story. But to come from, it just coming out wasn't the whole, that was just the beginning of what we went through. So getting through high school, really getting to college was his do-over. And he went to college and he was himself. And, that's when life really started to resume for him. And I say I got my kid back. But it was a hard journey, and it was a huge learning experience for his father and me. And I guess, I'll stop here, but just simply say that I can't say it enough, that coming out was just the beginning. It was not the end of the story by a long shot.
Thank you, Donna. Jean, would you like to share?
Sure. So my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm just going to talk about my son, Hannibal, who fully transitioned in 2020. So he was one of the very few people that I know that actually had a decent year last year. It was such a crazy time when we were able to get both surgeries in. So he was delighted. He's 20 years old. And he came out to us when he was in middle school after a suicide attempt, if we're going to just be open. And he came out to us as gay. And I was like, great, thanks for sharing your truth. This is wonderful. It explains a lot of things and all this other stuff. So then I endeavored to be a better parent to him, Hannah at the time, his dead name. And then as he got older and went into high school, which was really tricky, he was definitely curious and exploring things and all these different things. And then by the time he got to college, he let us know that he was indeed trans, non-binary, and wanted to go through with gender reassignment. And I think for a week I had a heart attack, and then I was like, okay, got it. Like he needs me to be supportive, and I want to be supportive. But then I had to kind of say, okay, so now I have 3 boys. And what about that little girl and all that kind of selfish nonsense that parents do, right? So everybody uses the correct pronouns, and we kind of catch each other and call each other out if we miss. And so I felt like I just needed to research because I didn't know that much about the trans community. So I watched every documentary. I've read as many books as I can. I listened to podcasts and, all that kind of stuff. And I find myself in the role of an educator now. We've definitely had to draw lines in the sand with certain members of the family, but if they don't make you feel good about yourself, then, and that wasn't hard for us. I just feel like, I'm just afraid, of course, because you worry about your kids, but I feel like, my husband and I both, we just really, I get along with him so much better now as he is than before as he was. And that makes me just so happy because do anything for your kid, so I think I talked about how I was going to be on here today, sharing with you guys. And I asked him permission to be able to say certain things. I just wanted to get his okay on everything, and he just said, just make sure that the biggest thing is that you have your parents supporting you, because life is hard and everything. But if you have that to come home to, and, no matter what, they have your back, that's huge. So things that people say like, oh, I would, I wouldn't want this for anybody, or, all the stupid things people say, that kind of stuff goes away when they're able to come back home and it's safe. So.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I just want to jump back in here because so much of what Jean said is parallels our journey as well. The difference was, I will freely admit in the beginning, I didn't, in no way, shape, or form did I reject my child, but I don't think I was unusual that I went through a period of sort of bargaining or saying, are you sure this isn't a phase? Like, I think every parent of a transgender kid just about sits there thinking, because life is just hard as it is, and throwing this on top of it, it's like, are you sure? Are you, And I think that was, between parent and child, our hardest, the hardest part of our relationship once this came to light. Because he so desperately wants, like his next thing is like, I want to be on T, I want to do this, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, let me catch up. I got like 3 years to catch up here. And I really pulled the reins to get him to slow down. And I learned that was very frustrating for him. And there were a couple of key moments where he got my attention, and I realized, all right, we got to move. And one of the, I'll tell a quick story and then I'll shut up. But my son was a hockey player, and a good hockey player. And when he came out, he could not continue on the girls' team he was on. He didn't want to. I mean, there were a lot of reasons, but whatever. But he still loved hockey. So he joined an adult league, and they were great. These adults were great. But when he came out one night and he was in tears, and he was about 16. And I'm like, what's up? I'm like, oh, these adults mean to you. I'm going to go beat them up, And he said, no, Mom, he said, and this was at a time when we're struggling about the T, he wants it. I'm like, wait, back and forth. And he said, Mom, I love hockey, but when I'm out on the ice, he said, when I can keep my voice lower, but when I have to call for the puck, when I have to yell, you have to yell on the ice. He goes, I sound like a girl. And it was just so hard on him, because he's so much to that moment is a guy, and then he opens his mouth. And something about that moment just resonated with me and said, you know what, it's time. We are finding an endocrinologist. I am, you convinced me. I'm there. We're good. Thank you for waiting for me. You weren't always so patient, but you mostly were, and thanks, and let's go. So from there, things really took off. So that's my story, my little story of millions. I'll shut up.
Oh, good. And Donna, you had brought up something. I'm going to throw it over to Jean in a minute and then come back. You talked about when your child comes out to you, and I'm using child in a parent-child relationship, not, for our youth, but that when that moment comes that your child comes to you and there's that truth-telling moment, your child is already so many miles or so much further ahead of you. And Jean, could you speak to that? And then Donna, you've spoken a little bit about that, but maybe speak more about that as well. What that's like as a parent, understanding that your child is there, but you're right here, and what that, and maybe for some of our youth that are here too, so that they can help to appreciate that place their parents are in at that moment.
Sure. So, I felt like I jumped the gun because I wanted to be supportive, and I just was like, you'll deal with however you feel later. And then at one point, and I did say to Hannibal at one point, it was probably within that first week. And I just said, you know what? You got me for 75% solid. You got to give me that 25. And he was so angry with me. And I didn't have the language to say, you've been kind of working through this and looking at stuff and feeling things for years. Like you were saying, Donna, give me a minute, I didn't even feel that I had the right to do that, kind of, because the fact that he was opening up to me at all and trusted me and needed me to support him, I felt like, well, that's just like spitting in his eye. I didn't feel comfortable saying that. And so that was tricky. Yeah.
I muted myself. Donna, go ahead.
I don't know how much more to add. It's not a good feeling when you're supposed to be the parent and, have the answers, and here's your child in front of you clearly suffering. And you got your feelings, and not only is it about feelings, but it's about knowledge. And so if there's anything I would say to the young people in this room is it's hard when you're young. I know I really was young once, and how it's hard to be patient, but it really, you're educators with your parents. I mean, you just help them find the vocabulary, help them feel comfortable asking you questions. And I did the same thing that Jean did. You know, I I loved watching, I forget the name of it. I Am Jazz. I loved, if you have, I loved watching that show. Just, it informed me, even though it was a male to female child, there was so much common there. But where I could, I tried to just learn. But that's the hardest thing is wait for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the space aspect.
Yeah.
There's another part too. And again, I'm going to ask this, and if you're not comfortable speaking to it, that's fine. But it comes up a lot with parents, and for our young people that are here, I want them to hear this as well, and maybe other parents. There's a grieving process that young people don't understand that some parents go through, especially when parents struggle and trip over the dead name and the new name and aspects. And as you mentioned, that young person is already here, but they've already moved on. And for parents, there's a path. And can either of you speak to what that's like as well in the process? Jean, I saw you take your mute off, so go ahead.
Unless Donna wants to go, but I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, so just taking down all the pictures, and I had like dance recital stuff and first communion stuff and graduation pictures and just family pictures and things like that. But I thought how hard it must be for him to have to look at that stuff and walk around the house and see that. It just, like, there's so many kind of really bad memories affiliated or associated with those pictures. And so it was like, well, what's more important? You want to have a nice looking hearth, like with different pictures on it, or it's a thing, it's nothing. And you have everything up here. You don't have to throw them out, just get them out of the line of sight. And I think that I didn't feel like it was the right due to grieve. I felt like that would somehow be a bad thing. I've got friends and I've helped them, when they've come out to their parents, and we've talked about what they would need from their parents and stuff. And I was like, okay, I got a catalog of what I can do. And it just seemed like that was more important than the grieving part. But then it sort of came out when I wasn't expecting it. Like when he had his top surgery, I dropped him off at Buffalo General, and I couldn't go in with him. And I was so upset about it, and I think I said something really dumb, like, well, I'm just saying goodbye to my little girl, or something the worst thing I could say. And I saw his eyes got real big. I'm like, I'm an idiot. Just like, if we could rewind that, I'd love to take that back. And then I went home and had a cocktail, but whatever. But so little things like that. But I guess now I'm at the point where the way I'm able to kind of get over my grief is to celebrate who he is now, because that's who he is now. And this is how he's going to be. And I love who he is. And so I feel like in order to kind of get through all that kind of stuff, like I want everybody to watch. In my family, I had them all watch like Disclosure, the amazing documentary that's on Netflix. You want some history? There it is. And Laverne Cox is amazing. So there's, I kind of try to use that like an educator, but not be snarky about it. But that's all I do is talk about stuff like that, because this is who he is. And I'm always going to pick my kid. That's how it's going to be. I hope that answered the question.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Donna, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. It's not that I didn't grieve. But I think what was really attention getting in this whole process was I saw early on the pain that he was in, and the really serious consequences that could happen. I mean, you never want to see your child hurting, and good God, if they're, Cam was a cutter, and I knew nothing, like almost nothing about that. That was a real shocker to me, that someone could be in such pain that that's what they're doing to themselves. Like, so I almost couldn't allow myself. It was almost a luxury to to worry about. And the thing, I think what was also maybe a little helpful is Cam wasn't a girly girl. So, and neither am I. And so like that, I just didn't lose myself in that stuff, but I probably grieved it on some level, but I would say that when he had the top surgery, that was a difficult day, because it really is a physical transformation. The T kind of takes time and all that. That's real. And that's major surgery. There's like lots of things in there. By the time we got to the hysterectomy part, that was just yay for you. It was just yay. And I'd been through enough to know that this is just who he is, and this is what we're doing, and all good things, going on. But it's just, I was almost like I didn't have time to grieve. Where I suffered was every time I had to tell somebody. It was hard, who knew Cam. It was hard. It was very emotional to tell somebody. And maybe that's where my grieving came out, not until one day when I had a friend who called me out of the blue, and I asked about Cam, and I had to tell her this, and started crying, as I always did. And she's like, whoa, stop. And she told me a similar story about her son, who was born with a cleft palate. And she said, Donna, I know exactly what you're going through. It's different, but it's the same. She said, I would have to explain about my son. I felt I had to explain every single time, until one day my sister told me, stop it. You don't have to explain to anybody. You just share it and you move on. And if they love you, they love you. And if they love him, they love him. And if not, but stop explaining. And that was like some of the best advice I ever got. And I did. From that day on, I just share his story and move on. And it was just a wonderful wake-up call.
I just thought of something. I was thinking about, when I was talking to my friends, or people that about what was going on, they would give me this look like they felt bad for me. And then I could see them changing their mind maybe about my kid. And that infuriated me, because I thought, if I'm going to feel some kind of way, as the kids say, I'm going to do it in my own terms. I'm not like airing out dirty laundry. I'm including you in this kind of amazing transformation that's happening in my son's life, So I realized pretty quickly that, my friends that have kids that are, cis and do all the typical type of things that kids do. I didn't feel comfortable sharing about my son, because I felt like they didn't have the listening skills for it. And all they would think would be, oh yeah, Jean's kid who used to be a girl, that kind of thing. And I was like, they're not cool enough to even know about him. There's so much to brag about, and so that was an interesting kind of time. And I think it's probably still happening, with COVID has changed things a lot. So, but yeah, that's where, you feel like your claws come out over your kid.
Oh, so. No question. Sue, you're muted.
Thanks, Donna. For anyone who's part of our audience this evening, if anyone has any questions for Jean or for Donna, you may put them in the chat, or you may unmute and ask your question directly. So I'm just going to wait a second to see if there's any questions that anyone has that they want to offer.
Something I would just like to say to the young people out there is that, I can only imagine how difficult it is to come out to your parents, because you just want to be loved, right? Like everybody. And you know, I think about my son and could have not have two parents who loved him any more than we do and accept him any, you know, as his perfect self. Yet how hard it was for him to tell us. I cannot even begin to imagine how hard it is to be in in a in a home or in a bigger family where you're really, really, truly afraid of that. And I'm just grateful there's a place like this for you to go, the GSAs that you can be part of, because I know that's very hard and very scary time, and you need all the support you can get.
Thank you for that, Donna. And that's a big part of it. Listening to both you and Jean, you both are supportive parents, supportive families. And it's not that it was a totally easy road, as you are sharing and will be sharing, but there at least was a welcoming of your child. Your child was not kicked out onto the street. Your child was not sent to go fend for themselves or dismissed outright. And that is what so many of our young people deal with. And Donna, you were just speaking to this. What kinds of advice might either of you have for a young person who may be preparing to tell and have a truthful conversation about their authentic self with their family? What might they do to help to prepare for that, even though, you know, we can't control or know, but in the preparation for that, what might you advise them?
This is going to sound stupid, but I would say, even if you don't use any of the notes that you would take, I would jot some stuff down just to keep you focused, because I think sometimes parents hear certain things and then they glom onto one or two things you say and you're like, it's going off the rails. I want to get back to what I wanted to say. And if for no other reason than just to keep you focused and kind of harness your parents back in, because if you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants with this, you know who you are, and you've thought so much about having this conversation probably for days and years even, and for you to actually share your truth with them, it should be something that is really kind of planned out from your end, just so that you feel good, you feel confident, and you can just, you know, even do bullets or index cards. Like I said, you may not even use them, but and then I also think, you know, possibly role playing with someone, if you have a GSA that you're involved with, you know, or if you have a trusted adult that you want to role play with, just so that you can like sort of anticipate certain things, you know, expressions on people's faces and stuff that can be derailing too. Because you're gonna be staring right at your parents and they're gonna, you know, do something that you're like, and it might give you pause and you may not want to go on again. So as, you know, just as centered as you can be ahead of time, I think it would really be helpful.
Very good advice. Donna?
You know, I hate to give advice to the person who's coming out, because I haven't been in those shoes. But as the person hearing it, I think it might be useful, depending on who the parent is, to kind of do this slowly, introduce ideas, and, you know, don't expect it to be, it doesn't necessarily come out. If the conversation starts going sideways, take a breath and step back and give them a chance to process it. Because, you know, once you hit that wall, like I don't want to see all your good energy go against that wall. Like, I think, you know, maybe you made a little progress, you planted a seed, and the seed grows a little, goes a little more, goes a little more. And you can find different ways over time. But again, that's hard when you're young, you're impatient, you want to say it, you want everybody to know it, you want everybody to embrace it, you want to just start going forward. And unfortunately, that's just not the way some people are built. And I was I told you, I was in that, well, let's just take a breath. It could be a phase, it could be this. And then, you know, it took me time to absorb. I will tell you a funny story about Jean mentioned Laverne Cox. When Cam started, he went to Canisius College. When he started, it was Christmas time. Right before Christmas time, he was going to be starting in the fall. And I decided to stop in at Canisius and get him some Canisius gear for Christmas present. And I walked into the bookstore area. And as I walked in, there is this big poster of Laverne Cox, who was coming to Canisius to speak the following in January. And I saw this and I stopped and I just thought, signs from the universe. I just looked at this. I took a picture of it with my phone and I sent it. I was like, Kim, you can't believe this, but Laverne Cox is coming next month. So that I just, in that moment, I just thought he's meant to be here for one thing. But the other part of this story is that I had to have a conversation in January with their residence life director because Cam was going to live on campus. And I had to share this because he wanted to live on campus, but he wanted to live in the guys' dorm and he needed a safe space. And so I spoke with one of the residence hall directors, and it was one of these typical, it was just like this flashback again of telling somebody, and you're so scared for your child. And I started to explain to her that he was transgender, and I just dissolved into tears. And she stops me and says, I want you to know he'll be supported here, and gave me this wonderful support talk. I felt so much better. And I said, at the end of it, I said, thank you for saying that. I said, I have this really good vibe because I told her about the Laverne Cox poster and we kind of laughed about it. And, I was like, phew, okay. Well, the following week, she emails me and says that she has 2 tickets for Cam to go see Laverne Cox at Canisius and do a meet and greet with her afterwards. It was just like, oh my gosh, the world just is such a good place. So, you wonder sometimes, but that day, this person, it just, I don't know what the point is to this story, but it was meant to be. And of course he met her and it was wonderful. And so anyway, good, whatever. It's just part of the story.
Gifts come in lots of ways. There's a great story that Laverne Cox tells about when they were younger and dressing in women's clothes and doing the hair. And people would say to Laverne's mom, oh, you letting them dress that way? Oh, it's terrible. Oh, they're going to end up working down on the streets in New Orleans. Oh, what are you doing? And Laverne says, and yep, that's exactly what happened. One night I was walking on the street in New Orleans. I was on my way to Tulane. I was getting an honorary doctorate. So
yeah.
And again, it just that juxtaposition of sometimes, people will lead you in one way and sometimes life goes, but it's not without its struggles. And one of our parents who's here is writing that they are appreciating your sharing this evening and talking about their child's coming out. And they mentioned about the hurting and self-harming. And as we know, children come out, I'm talking about the parent, youth come out sometimes many ways before they actually come out. And it's not always in a healthy fashion. And Donna, you had spoken about this, our parent here spoke about it as well. And so what might we say to the youth or to other parents who are here about, as one starts to see some of these signs without maybe knowing what they are, how we might be able to be more supportive or help that journey of sharing? Anyone who wants to speak to that?
Go ahead, Jean, if you.
Okay. I don't know. There's so many books out there about how to be a good parent to a teenager, right? And one of the things I've always learned is that if you are driving with your kid in the car, you're going to have a good conversation because you're not staring at the kid and your eyes aren't, boring holes into them. You're paying attention to your driving or all that kind of stuff. And there's a tendency for kids to kind of open up if you're driving in the car. And then the other
absolutely, I've had that conversation in the car. Yes,
the other thing,
yep.
Yeah, is if, you know, you're up at night and you're just maybe in the kitchen or in the living room watching a movie, or you're just available, you're around. And then when they come in or whatever, and you're just sort of like, hey, how was your day? Or you give them a snack, whatever. If you're present at night and it's kind of a chill atmosphere, they have more of a tendency to share and talk to. And I think sometimes I felt more comfortable in those scenarios addressing things or asking questions of my kids, you know, all three of them. So that has always helped me.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. You know, Cam started, I don't know, he got into this explanation of vocabulary, and I remember as him driving, I'm going, where's this going? Like, what? And but I was listening, and I just let him talk, and I learned. I mean, he did. But I realized that was, I think, my first clue that I need to do some education here, because I know some of what he's talking about, but there's a lot I don't. And I had one of those kind of conversations. Actually, Cam had come out as gay to me. We like to thrift, and we were in some thrift shop and just going through stuff and looking at clothes, and I think I actually just kind of turned to him and said, you know, are you gay? And it was just like kind of casual in the course of things. And he looked at me and said, well, I think I'm bi. And it was just like this funny, casual conversation in the thrift shop. But it got that I wasn't afraid to say something, and not in a freaked out way, but just kind of a curious, and let him talk. And you know, I think that helps. By the time we got home, we were sitting in the garage. We were talking a lot by that point. And he says to me, do you think Dad knows? And I'm sitting there going, yes, Dad knows. We're just haven't had the conversation. I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure he does. So but that's where we started. It was just, again, just like what you were saying, Jean, you know, first it was about sexual orientation, and then it became gender identity. So it's, and that's maybe because they just have more words for that early on or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's funny how those conversations can flow at those quiet, casual moments.
Yeah, and there's the phrases that, like you were talking about, the degrees of belief. Sometimes a child won't say they're gay; they'll say they're bi. It's like the
Right.
steps,
Right.
and it may
Right.
be that the child is bi, but it's like wading in from the shallow end sometimes.
Yep.
For some youth's journeys as they go along. Coming back though, you were talking about your journeys as parents as well. And I know you both have been in different kinds of supportive places. Can you talk about the assistance as a parent that you sought out and received to help you? You know, we've been talking about the child, but what about you as an adult, as a parent? Where did you go and what kinds of helps did you receive?
We were living in Pittsburgh when Cam came out, and when we finally did decide to help him get started with testosterone, it was the pediatric endocrinologist who connected us with, I mean, this woman was wonderful. You know, she just realized that she had more and more transgender children coming in to see her, and she was connecting the parents. She was smart enough to know that that the parents needed a place to gather as well, and she connected us with that group. And so when I moved to Buffalo, I tried to connect. I sort of looked around. The closest I could find was Gliss. And I worked with the previous executive director to get the parents group started there. And I'm very glad I did. We've connected with lots and lots of parents over the years. And it's just to have that space where you're not explaining to everybody, you know, everyone knows, like, the questions, they're different kind of questions, different kind of conversations that you have at that point. And so certainly I got an awful lot out of it, so much that when I moved back to Buffalo, I really felt I wanted to give back and help start that group.
A very good friend of mine is gay, and so I used him as a resource. I've known him forever, that kind of thing. He's just a good friend. And then I just did a lot of digging on my own. I'm not going to lie to you about, I joined the PFLAG group 2 months ago, and this is my first experience with GLIS. Like, seriously, I had no clue. So I just did a lot of reading, like I said, documentaries, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And I talked to just very good friends of mine and my husband, of course, my other 2 sons. But I don't know. I guess that I didn't, like I said, I just knew that I knew what my kid needed, I guess. And so I found a lot of comfort in that. I think once he was very, after he came out as gay and everything, he then started to kind of dress extra feminine and do all these different things. And I was like, okay. And then he turned in the opposite direction. He cut his hair off and no more makeup, and, a lot of kind of like androgynous looking clothes and a lot of hiding in clothes and things like that. And tattoos and things like, and I was like, okay. So I just kind of was trying to figure out, like, where is he then? Because he told me this, but I'm seeing this and this, I'm not quite sure. So I would talk with him a lot. And I think he actually was very patient with me after we had our first week of confusion. And he explained a lot of things to me. And so then I'd say, okay, so then this means this. And then, so when you say this, and it was just, he knew that I was coming from a good place and I wanted to be armed with as much information as I could. So that's what I did.
And the coming out, whether a child is coming out as bisexual, gay, lesbian, transgender, pansexual, there's a similarity in the path of sharing, in the build up and the preparation, and even within the parent of receiving that information, which is a lot of what's been shared tonight. We have about 2 minutes left. And again, I want to open, if anyone who's here has any questions that they'd like to ask, either in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and please share or ask if you'd like. And of course, to Donna and to Jean, I just want to thank you so much for your honesty, for your vulnerability, and for sharing from the heart the truth of what your family and your child have gone through, because it's that kind of sharing that helps other parents to see and to compare and to learn. And hopefully as we go along, so that other parents then can find those supports, can get that information, and that everyone can have a safe and happy, authentic coming out. We know that that doesn't always happen, but it would be nice if people could receive that information in a positive and healthy way. And also just speaking about the supports again for parents, that PFLAG locally has support groups that they run for all parents. GLIS has support groups for transgender parents, and we also have a more general, we just call it LGBTQ, to be inclusive for all parents who are dealing with young people who are coming out and going through journeys and process. And I also like how you articulated that for the young people, it is a journey. It's coming out of the closet is true. You got to try on and figure out what clothes you're wearing, what styles, what manners, and that walking through that with a parent, as a parent, is not easy. And so again, the more supports, the more connections, and the more that people can talk to each other. So your presence here tonight is just invaluable. And from GLIS, we just can't thank you enough for being here.
Well, I'm honored to be here, so thank you, really.
Any last questions from anyone? There's nothing in the chat. No one is unmuting. We are right near our time. So I just don't want to cut anybody off, but also know that for anyone here, if any questions come up after this workshop, you can of course email to GLIS or call GLIS. That you're here, you know how to get to our website and all of our information. And Staff at Gliss would be more than happy to talk with you. Faith just put my personal email from Gliss. Please contact me. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it out. We will not leave you without something that will be supportive and connective. And also on our website, you'll find the listings for our groups, which this week we've been suspended with everything because we've been doing our workshops. But again, next week we pick up again. So again, thank you to Donna and Jean. Thank you to everyone who has been here this evening. Drive home safe. I know you're on your Zooms, but that's okay. I like to say that. Drive home safe. And tomorrow is the fabulous closure. So at 4 o'clock, feel free and come and watch the fabulous drag show. So I hope all of our young people and even the parents come along too and just see how we close out our week. So have a good night, everybody.